In this episode, Golden, David Raiklen, and I discuss Spider-Man: No Way Home. Full speed ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power. The Omega Beam.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 154. I'm your host, Oren Merton. So if you're into pop culture at all, and specifically superhero movies, you know that the latest Sony Marvel Spider-Man movie, called Spider-Man: No Way Home, is in theaters right now. We've been watching most things at home recently, but this is an event movie that we did not want to miss. So we went out to the theaters along with friend of the show, David Raiklen. We start this discussion spoiler-free for the first couple minutes, but this is a wide-ranging discussion, and we really wanted to get into the good bits as soon as we could. So we give you warning before we slip into the spoilerific part, but keep that in mind. So with that said, let's get to it. I am here with Golden and friend of the show, David Raiklen. Hello, David.
Hi, everybody. So good to be here.
And we have braved Omicron to talk about Spider-Man: No Way Home playing in theaters. So we'll start with a very, very short spoiler-free section because you've probably already seen it. And it's pretty hard to give details without giving anything away. But how'd you guys like it?
I thought it was well-deserving of all the accolades that it is getting. It was a lot of fun. It had its drama, it had its comedy, it had its sad points, it had all the emotion that you would like in a movie.
Absolutely. David?
It's a high-energy, joyful rush. It achieves laughter, tears, and resonance as few films have ever done. If you have seen any Spider-Man movie, then you want to see this one.
And I think also, as someone else I saw that posted on the internet, this movie does fan service right. It plays to the fans, but doesn't overdo it.
It achieves that extremely difficult ambience of feeling like a comic book come to life. It's like you were reading a series of great issues where the writer and the artist and everything were perfectly clicking, except that it's happening on a 50-foot screen with Dolby surround sound.
Yeah. I would agree with both of you. I think it was incredibly well made. It was a very tight story and tight script. It looked great. It sounded great. It was, I don't even know how long the movie was because I was not looking at my watch, or I was just drawn into it completely. And I think that's what good movies do. They really draw you into it.
I was drawn into it, but I was looking at my watch because it was the first time that we'd left the baby with a babysitter that she did not know previously. So I was just kind of making sure that everything was going on okay at home. But no, I mean, and we saw it in the Dolby Cinema Theater, which I think really, it was just nice to have a very comfortable seat to watch it as well.
And amazing visuals and great sound.
Yeah, it's a beautiful movie. Like Oren was saying, you know, it's, if you just like movies, this is a really well-made movie.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely amazing looking. And of course, they hired amazing actors and producers and directors. I mean, every element. It's all there.
And with hearing, oh, this person's going to be in it. Oh, this person's going to be in it. Or that person's going to be in it. I really wasn't sure what to expect. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't anything that I thought I was going to see. It wasn't expected. It brought the characters together in a way that made sense. It really came back to the heart of who he is, who is Spider-Man. And I really liked that.
That's really well said. It does ultimately focus on Peter Parker and Spider-Man. It also spends a lot of time on all of these other characters. And each one of them you want to have more of.
Yeah, I mean, that's a sign of a good movie where it leaves you wanting more as opposed to feeling like, oh my God, why did they include so much about this side character that I really don't care about?
You care about all the characters. And I really feel like we've said, okay, it's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, go see it. So from now on, I'm sorry because I want to get into the heart of things. Spoilers.
Right. If you haven't seen it,
spoilers.
and have been
And
hearing
for your
nothing,
last warning, spoilers. Okay, so you have all these Spider-Men, all these different incarnations, and they don't need to explain anything to each other because they are each other, even though they are at different times in their lives. They all still get it, and you see our Peter Parker or Tom Holland Peter Parker and his loss, and he wants to tell, like, no, don't tell me that you know how I feel, but they do. Each in their own way has done that, and you find where the one comes to terms with, how he got to actually have a relationship, and the other one having the loss that he didn't think that he could ever get back from, and having a moment to redeem himself in this MJ. It's not who he lost, but being able to save her really is just a turning point for him as well.
We have post-midlife crisis Spider-Man, we have midlife crisis Spider-Man, and we have young adult Spider-Man. All three stages.
Yes.
Right on screen.
And each of the actors portrays that so well that they are Spider-Man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there isn't one that you said, okay, this one isn't Spider-Man and this one is. No, they all are. They all are in their own way, in their own time, in their own age group. And I want to give special credit to the script writers because there were a bunch of the Spider movies. Spider-Man 3 tried to introduce a bunch of characters. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 tried to introduce a bunch of characters. Both of those movies failed because the script writers lost the plot, so to speak. That ultimately you're in a Spider-Man movie for Spider-Man, and they lost the plot by going on to these other side stories for too long, too much, whereas what the scriptwriters of Spider-Man No Way Home did incredibly well is no matter how many other characters they brought in, they were still focused at all times on MCU Spider-Man. It was his movie, and they never forgot that. So it never felt like you were losing the movie, even as they brought in these other characters, even as they're having their Spider Bro working together moments. You never lost the plot.
And the fact that in these other movies, those movies weren't always necessarily successful. Or people didn't feel like those villains were successful in terms of bringing them to life. And this gave them new life.
Yes.
Literally for some of them. Absolutely literally. And the not wanting to give up on someone, I mean, is it really his problem? If I'm walking down the street and there's a piece of trash, I didn't put it there, is it really my problem? And it is. I mean, I can do something about it. And
yes,
he starts to see that he that's who he really wants to be. And he's fighting it because MJ, Ned, him, none of them are getting into college because they got pulled into his drama. So he wants to fight it. He doesn't want any more of the drama. He wants to go back to normal. But normal isn't who he is.
Yeah, what's the definition of normal when you're Spider-Man?
Well, what's the definition of normal for any of us?
Well, Chris McKenna and Eric Summers are the two people that I mentioned in my little written review of Spider-Man No Way Home, because I really think that even though everybody is great, and I mean that the first round of Oscar shortlist nominations came out, and the film has already been nominated for 2 Oscars. So I'm not the only person who thinks that everything has been done really great.
Which Oscars?
But they are the most outstanding ones because they took characters and situations from other movies and improved on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. I mean, these weren't characters that people necessarily felt were successful in those movies, and yet they made them successful here.
Yes, that's a very, very difficult thing to pull off. And, of course, they made all of their own original material work, too.
Right. Speaking of things that worked better in this movie, I have to admit, with no offense meant at all to Andrew Garfield as a person or an actor, I was simply not crazy about The Amazing Spider-Man. And I thought he did better, and his Spider-Man was a more realized character in No Way Home than in his solo movies.
Right. In a way, McKenna and Summers got Andrew Garfield's version of Spider-Man better in those few scenes than the team did when he was the lead.
And I think they did a great job with Tobey Maguire as, you know...
And I'm sure that was a lot of rewrites. I'm sure that they had many iterations that they had to go through to get everything clicking so well.
Sure, and I think Tobey Maguire was great as I loved the line "youth pastor," or your costume as a youth pastor. But I think he was kind of in a way the elder statesman Spider-Man. I think he was fantastic in that role.
And he's actually been retired from acting or hasn't done any roles in like 7 years. But what a way to come back!
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What a way to come back.
And speaking of comebacks, with Matt Murdock. And you have simultaneously Kingpin and Daredevil coming back to the MCU in a way.
Yes. And Kingpin, of course, started out as a Spider-Man villain.
Right.
So
Kingpin was a Spider-Man
lots of possibilities there.
Yeah.
And what can you say? Mr. Cox was just born to play Daredevil.
Absolutely.
Has that role down perfectly.
That was the only thing that I knew going into the movie, and I think I even had read about what happens with the brick. I was still caught off guard when it happened and was able to enjoy that.
That was another great line, and his delivery was perfect. How did you do that? I'm a really good lawyer.
Right.
I'm a very good lawyer. So
I mean, he completely brushed aside effortlessly the probing question.
I do have to admit, skipping to the end, I was very sad. I mean, I so love the chemistry between Tom Holland and Zendaya, between MJ and Spider-Man, that I was really sad that they reset that whole thing.
I think too many people around him have been hurt. And he just can't see that she gets hurt because of him again. Because she's still wearing it, and she doesn't even know why.
And from a business point of view, if they do have to write her out, that is a convenient way to do it.
Yes, well, who knows how long their contracts are? I mean, I know that Holland has already signed on to do more pictures, but I don't know about the rest of the cast. I also think that they've gotten Benedict Cumberbatch, who, by the way, if they gave him more screen time, he would have stolen the movie.
Right. He's amazing in everything, especially as Doctor Strange, but in everything. We haven't talked about the music yet. In general, I am a fan of Michael Giacchino. I think didn't he do the previous 2 Spider-Man movies for this franchise? I think he did. I could be wrong.
I know he did one of them. I don't remember if he did both.
Okay. I really liked the music. I thought it was incredibly appropriate. It really carried the emotion. I would put this up as a very good soundtrack as well.
Yeah, I thought it was a good soundtrack. I would say that it certainly was on a par with the rest of the high-quality production. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't go to see this movie just for the soundtrack. It's got many elements that are stronger than the soundtrack. But it was, it did its job well, and it's hard to sing the theme song to any of the MCUs.
Yeah, well, none of them are, it's true, none of them are all that hummable. I did like the fact, I do remember that Michael Giacchino did the soundtrack to the Doctor Strange movie, and I did like the fact
that did get reprised.
Yeah, and I liked the reprise. I thought that was good, and it kind of made me smile. So much of this movie is just like Golden said, it is fan service in the best way. It's not fan service in an insulting way, like, oh, it's just fan service. No, it's like they know what fans of Spider-Man, what fans of the MCU really want to see, and they give it to them not necessarily in the way they were expecting it, but they give it to them in a way that is...
And it's also not cheap.
Yeah.
There's substance to it.
Yeah, they give it to them in a way that is satisfying, that makes story sense,
Yes. Well, I think that's what happens when you work with the creator of the characters for 20 years. You get a sense of, okay, this is their intention, and this is why they changed direction, and there's a level of understanding there that's just, there's no other way to get it, is that you understand what the creator was trying to accomplish.
Right.
And then the refinements that they made over decades to keep it current. Now, I'm not saying this is the most important thing, far from it, but Spider-Man is going to probably make over $1 billion, even though we're in a situation where no other movie has gotten even half that much. So it's really a testimony to the enduring lovability of Peter Parker / Spider-Man, that even in a pandemic, people are willing to turn out in record numbers to see that character.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about the specific theater we went to, AMC's Dolby Cinema. I think they do what they can. The woman who was there checking tickets was telling people to put on masks if they didn't have a mask on. So they were definitely trying to keep the theater as safe as possible. And I think that with more and more people, hopefully one day everybody, but with more and more people vaccinated, I think that it's going to continue to be safer and safer, even as, these viruses do not go away. So I think everybody is doing what they can. You can be safe, but at the same time, everyone should also have the pandemic in their mind. And I do agree with you that you're not just going to go out for anything. It's not like, pre-pandemic days when it's like, oh, it's Friday night. I don't know. Let's go to a movie. I mean, you really are going to go to destination movies, but not necessarily just, it's a Friday night, let's hit the cinema and see what's playing at the time we're there. So I do think that destination movies will continue to be successful. Obviously, Spider-Man more successful than most. But I think I don't remember the exact saying. The demise of the cinema is a little premature. I think it's going to weather the pandemic.
Well, people said back in the 1950s that television was going to be the end of movies, that no one would want to go to the movies anymore. Now, movie studios are making more money than they ever have in their history. So actually, it turned out that instead of hurting the movies, television became a whole new revenue stream.
Yeah. Yeah, well, where there's a will, there's a way. Plus, I know that a lot of people who really prefer sort of, let's call them mature dramas, have been bemoaning the fact that the movies making all the money are like Spider-Man No Way From Home and sort of tentpole movies, and that the smaller, more expensive than art house, but not $200 million movies, that the cinema market for them is dwindling. But at the same time, I keep reading that, Netflix buys another movie for $100 million and things like that. So it's not like these movies aren't getting made. It's not like they're not getting good actors, good screenwriters, good directors to make these movies.
It's just they have to figure out how to market them, and they can't expect to drop it into the mainstream movie market and get the money that the superhero movies are getting.
Right. Spider-Man will make Spider-Man money.
The highest grossing film of all time before Gone with the Wind was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Interesting.
So even back in the 1930s, in the golden age of Hollywood,
so you're saying
the
we're
most
circling
successful
back to Disney.
movies where it was a cartoon about pigs
Right.
and dwarves and stuff. So that really kind of is where the biggest audience interest has always been, is things that are kind of family entertainment that people of all ages can relate to it.
Yeah.
So serious adult dramas have never made the top box office, although they certainly have done better in the past than they have now, but they never were the most successful movie.
Yeah,
and I get the feeling that people who are bemoaning the current state of affairs are maybe misremembering how things used to be.
Yeah, or in some cases, sometimes even in the cases of directors I dearly admire, maybe there's a certain amount of bitterness there, that they were expecting to make more money or to get a cinematic release, and it turns out people are not as interested in what they delivered than what they hoped. And so they go on a rant, even though you should have known better, Ridley Scott. Anyway.
Right. Well, Ridley Scott had a great crowd-pleasing movie in The Martian, and I forget which one that he came out with.
Are you
this
saying
time was
science
what about the
fiction?
House of Gucci or something? Was he the director on that one?
I think he was. I think the one he was whining
but
about.
that clearly has a different audience.
Yeah, and
than
the
The
movie,
Martian.
Yeah, and he was whining about. I think it was The Last Duel that cost like $100 million or something, and had a great cast, but was really a more ponderous philosophical piece. And that's great, and they should always be there. Nobody wants to see those movies go away, but there's probably a lot more people who want to sit down on Netflix or Prime Video or Apple TV Plus and watch those kinds of things than want to spend a ton of money to go to a theater when the visuals and the sound maybe don't take advantage of that big screen and those huge array of speakers.
Yes. Well, while we're talking about other movies, the director of Spider-Man No Way Home, who is also the director of Homecoming and Far From Home, John Watts, his next project is The Fantastic Four.
I know. I'm very excited about that. And I have to say, the Fantastic Four were never my comic. That I always knew who they were. I knew what they looked like. I actually followed their comic for a little while, but it was never my favorite book. So every time they've made a Fantastic Four movie, I've never been that excited by it. It's like, oh, cool, Fantastic Four, yay, go Marvel. Or, Fox. But, and then the movies didn't get good reviews. I was like, oh, that's a bummer. But now that John Watts is at the helm, now I'm interested.
Yes.
Because he can make a good movie. We've seen what he can do with superhero movies. So I'm definitely interested to see what he will do.
It's also interesting to think about what Spider-Man 4 is going to be, because they are clearly making that movie.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't mean making in the sense that they are going to. I mean that they are currently making that movie.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think
who's going to be the director?
Yeah. One of the things I think is funny, it just makes me giggle. And I'm in favor of it. I'm not saying that in a negative way. Is that Sony clearly wants, they've got $1 billion franchise in Spider-Man. They've got a $800 or $900 million franchise in Venom. And they just so want those two to interact. They are so desperate for it to happen. It is so
Tom
funny.
Hardy too, though.
Oh, he's great. Tom Hardy has nailed absolutely. And for everybody, I mean, we did an episode on Venom: Let There Be Carnage, and we were very, very effusive. But I think it's very clear. Tom Hardy co-wrote the story. He produces the movie. He loves this stuff. That kind of commitment, I think, from a creative tends to make an exciting result. And if he were that involved in a Spider-Man movie, I think it would only elevate the movie. And I don't know if that means Venom's going to be in Spider-Man 4, because we saw the little bit that left in the MCU even when Tom Hardy vanished. And of course, I don't know if they did that because they want to have Venom even if they can't have Tom Hardy, that maybe they can just have their own little symbiote thing. Maybe they're just going to make it Spider-Man's new suit, which is what it was when it was introduced in the comics, all those, in the 80s. But whatever it is, I would love to see it, assuming it's done right. And I think the creative teams involved have proven that they can do it right. I mean, Let There Be Carnage I enjoyed Venom 1 thoroughly. Venom 2 was a shorter and tighter movie, and I definitely think that the teams involved could really make a wonderful team-up movie.
I think it would just be
this
fun
was a
to
team-up
see
movie.
Tom Holland and Tom Hardy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Tom Holland has definitely played Spider-Man more than any other live-action person. Right.
He got to go to space. He fought more villains. He fought real aliens on their turf, as opposed to Tobey Maguire, who just kind of fought the Venom suit here on Earth.
Well, in that sense, the MCU version of Spider-Man does have a very significant departure from the graphic novel version of Spider-Man, because he really is the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I mean, he occasionally will battle cosmic menaces, but that's usually in someone else's book where it's a crossover and he's a guest star.
Right.
He's more concentrated on what's happening in New York City or New Jersey, not what's happening in another galaxy. So MCU really took Spider-Man out of the neighborhood and had him fighting cosmic menaces, which is something that they did really well. But that is a significant departure. And I wonder if they're going to kind of do a reset, and instead of trying to top this movie, instead they're going to go back to their roots.
It kind of seems like they set that up by making everybody forget who Spider-Man was, by making him sew his own spandex Spider-Man suit at the very end. It seems like they're setting him up to just be the neighborhood good guy for a while, which also lends itself, in my opinion, to some very fun sort of street-level team-ups if they wanted to with, say, Daredevil.
Yes. I wonder if that's the direction that they're going, okay, because this is really, in a sense, No Way Home is kind of like what Spider-Verse, the animated movie,
right,
or Endgame was, where they're bringing together all these different threads. And after you've done that, what comes next? And so far what's been happening are movies that are more focused on, how should we say, down-to-earth genres, right? Like Black Widow comes out, and it's a superhero spy thriller.
Right.
And it was great.
It was.
But, there no cosmic menaces there. And Shang-Chi, well, there is magic powers there, but it's definitely, again, very earthly, traditional magic powers.
Yeah.
Which can still be very exciting and very compelling.
Right. And I think that is what they're doing. And I think they're doing it incredibly well in the way they've decided to reset things and maybe bring it a little closer to home. And not obviously those who stayed till the bitter end, we got basically a trailer for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Right, and we got, as far as I know, the first crossover between the television and the theatrical movies.
Yeah, so that's definitely going to go, cosmic out there, the whole universe of space and time. So Marvel has in no way decided they're done with cosmic. They're just deciding which specific heroes are better in a more closer to home, smaller type of environment. And I think that's great. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful to have a variety, to have not every movie always be about this particular hero or this particular team saving all of reality, that it's fine to have some movies where they're just saving their block.
Yeah, attack the block.
Exactly. And which is great. And so I think I think Spider-Man is going to be more in that vein in the future. Of course, I could be completely wrong because they don't run anything by me, but that's what it seemed they're setting up, and I'm here for it. I am totally here for it. They gave me a great time, even though, like I said, this is not a movie flaw in any way. If anything, it's a success that they made me care so much. But I was very sad that MJ and Peter Parker are not together right now. But that's good storytelling, and we'll see if they just move on from that or if that becomes a recurring thing. We will see.
Yes. The end of the main part of the movie before the credits scene really did have that close to home feeling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was set in a little, coffee shop that's in a small neighborhood, and the stakes were just personal. There was no, the city or the galaxy or whatever is in trouble. It was just very quiet kind of drama. And there weren't a lot of dialogue exchanges either. It was a lot of acting with eye movements, glances, and just, you could tell what the people were thinking and feeling without them saying anything. It's very dramatic.
I'd be curious in future movies if they're going to play with the fact that he still knows all these people. He still has all his memories.
Yes. Well, that's an interesting thing right there, is because he has a memory of something that to everyone else is an alternate reality that never happened.
Yeah, we never saw him read MJ the letter, but it would have been very interesting to see what her reaction would be like. Dude, none of this happened. I've never met you before. What are you talking about?
So, talking about alternate universes, again, it comes back to the wonderful writing, because these are alternate universes because the writers made them that way. The writers of No Way Home, the previous set of filmmakers, had no intention of that being an alternate reality. That was their reality. So to incorporate all this and make it seem like it was intentional is just an incredible feat of writing. And I don't know if the awards-giving bodies will understand how hard it is to do that.
True.
It's kind of like jazz, where, somebody comes up with a really cool riff, and then the rest of the band recognizes it immediately, and they start going that way.
Yeah.
You talked about the fact that this might be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and we're back more in the neighborhood. Well, there's your entrance for Matt Murdock, because he knows there's something up about Matt Murdock. So maybe he kind of goes and sees what's up about Matt Murdock, and he follows this lawyer and finds out that this lawyer is Daredevil.
Right, and Matt Murdock, as I recall, because of his super senses, is able to figure out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He doesn't have to be told, because his abilities let him figure that out as a detective.
He could, he could, even though his mind was erased, that doesn't mean he's not going to figure it out. One of the things I refuse to do with Spider-Man No Way Home, because I like it so much, is to pick it apart. But the fact is, if one wanted to pick it apart, of course you could. I mean, the idea of making a whole world forget when they could just re-remember, it only goes so far. But it made for a great movie.
It's a little bit like when George R.R. Martin said that he loved comic books, and, he really did, because he could give you the issue number and the title of the issue and all the events that transpired. I mean, he is a true comic book fan. But he's saying that he thought that the only problem with comic books is that they should make death permanent. And it's like, no. See, that's the whole thing, is that these characters, whether they are superheroes or just, regular people, are living in a world where everything is negotiable.
Well, there's an irony to him
if
saying,
somebody dies and the fans don't like that they're dead, they're alive again.
But there's an irony to him saying,
if people get married and they don't like that they're married, they can get divorced. Everything can be adjusted.
The irony to him saying that they should just die is, how many characters in Game of Thrones actually came back? Because he actually had a character that would just die and come back, die and come back, die and come back. And then you have Jon Snow. Lady Ironheart didn't make it into the series, so we can't count her. But, because that was Catelyn Stark. But yeah, I mean, he doesn't even have people die permanently in his own series.
Yeah, and that comes from comics, which really are a mix of magic fantasy plus science fiction plus other genres as are needed, detective, romance, all these other things all go in there, plus superheroes. And that soup, or that tasty concoction, you can't really separate all those ingredients. They're all together.
Yeah.
Right? It's like in the comics, for many years, Spider-Man just relied on his superpowers. But now in the movies, he's got all this high-tech augmentation. And the audience is completely fine with that.
Sure.
Well, I think they had fun with that in the movie with Tobey Maguire, just tilting his hand back and shooting the web out, and the other two are looking at like, how are you doing that? Does your body make that? Is that the only location that it comes out of? I mean, they definitely had fun with that, I think.
Yes. That's also a very cool thing, is that Peter Parker is actually a really smart person. So the characters get to say things and do things that a smart person would do.
Well, MJ does reference that because she looks around the room and there's Peter, and Peter, and there's all these scientists, and she knows that her Peter is smart, so she knows that the other two are really smart.
Yeah, I did like how they hinted at Miles Morales coming into the MCU when, I think it was Yeah, it was Andrew Garfield who saved Electro. And Electro, he pulls off, Andrew Garfield pulls off his hat and he says, I thought you would have been black. And he says, don't worry, I'm sure somewhere there's a universe with a black Spider-Man. And we're all, yes, there is.
Yeah, Electro says that.
Yeah. Yes, there is. And that one is coming. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly.
We all saw Spider-Verse. It's coming.
Let's just talk for a moment about how brilliant Benedict Cumberbatch is, especially in setting up the premise for the whole movie and then being the person who pays off the premise of the whole movie.
Yeah.
Because all of this happens because of his spell, and it's his spell that eventually sets things right again. So Spider-Man is doing all of this running around and all this heroic stuff, but it's all happening because of Doctor Strange. And it's Doctor Strange who eventually saves the day, which is exactly the way they had it work in Infinity War and Endgame, where everybody's running around doing all these things and our attention is focused on them. But this is actually all Doctor Strange's plan. And he's just, very cool and very restrained. He doesn't let anybody know that he knows what's going on because that would mess up the plan.
Well, it's also that, he wanted just to press the button.
Yes.
And he's just,
But then the movie would have been over much.
Right. Yeah, we know, he tells us in the very beginning, he basically telegraphs without telling us that this is how the movie's going to end. Says, I've got this spell that'll make everybody forget who you are, and then you won't have to worry about going to jail or all this other stuff. And Peter tries to have it all kinds of different ways, and the entire movie ensues, and the movie is the lesson. And at the end, he realizes, no, it has to be this way.
There's a reason the spell is the way the spell is.
Yeah, and Doctor Strange gives him a few minutes, says, well, say your goodbyes. And he's very sympathetic, He sometimes he gets impatient with Peter because, he's not really the fathering type, but he still has a lot of patience for him and a lot of respect, I think.
He also is sad himself because he knows that includes him.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Doctor Strange is really a tragic character.
How cool is it that Wong is Sorcerer Supreme, though?
Yes. I wasn't expecting that.
Although that does put in a little different perspective the fact that he's spending his weekends cage fighting.
And also it kind of sets up that we're going to see, what is it? Not Ultimate Strange, but the version of Doctor Strange that was in What If.
Right.
That our universe's Doctor Strange is going to meet that Doctor Strange in Multiverse of Madness. Or at least that's what I've heard.
Well, they kind of set that up in the little preview when you see Doctor Strange with the desaturated dark lighting and he's got the nasty smirk. It kind of sets up for, what happens when Doctor Strange goes bad.
Yes.
But I did like how they set up also that Wanda...
look at what he does, just briefly, that his character has to look like he has superpowers by waving his hands in the air.
Right.
And until the visual effects kick in, that's just him acting.
Right.
Now, could any of the other actors bring that off? Where they're just waving their arms around.
Elizabeth Olsen, definitely.
It takes a really amazing actor to make that work without visual effects.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth Olsen does make it work. I agree.
There's a lot of them in the MCU that's what they're doing, and having to act out something that you can't actually see has got to be kind of tough.
Yeah, Elizabeth Olsen was talking about in an interview I read as part of the WandaVision series that she actually has like a gesture coordinator. She has someone that like a trainer basically who trains her in how to move her hands in such a way and consistently, because it's not just you have to invent something. It's that you've got to do it the same way.
Yeah, someone has to keep track of what type of thing causes what.
Right, because that's what makes it convincing is that, okay, this is the gesture for doing that thing, and there's another gesture for doing the other thing.
Yeah, I agree that it's one of the things Benedict Cumberbatch makes look absolutely effortless because he's just so talented. But I think that like Elizabeth Olsen and Benedict Wong, I think they have also taken the time and, learned. It's a skill. They've learned the skill. And
Yes.
I think that is part of taking it seriously, is just like the people like Chris Hemsworth who have to do these physical feats, have to train like crazy to do it, to do the gestures and actually pull them off. You have to do training as well. It's just, it doesn't involve a lot of weights and a whole separate diet.
Yes, very true. Oh, and that was another very cool thing. There were so many classic Ditko poses for Spider-Man in this movie.
There were, yeah. There were some points it was like, this is a splash page. This right here, this is a splash page.
Right. There were several beautiful splash pages. And that's a special treat that you only get in this kind of movie, because in other movies, you go, why are we looking at the person just posing?
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of the looks, I do have to say, I have loved the Russo brothers MCU movies. So this is not a slag, but they chose, especially in Civil War, but really in almost all of their MCU movies, they have chosen a very sort of subdued color palette. They have chosen to sort of desaturate the colors. That's what they're going for. And I really like the fact that John Watts went for a bold color that it just popped. And I think it was part of the gorgeousness of the movie.
Right. It's like Doctor Strange's magic cape has this brilliant crimson shade to it.
Yeah.
That makes it just pop out of any scene.
Yeah.
And it was great when it grabbed Ned. And Ned's
like,
Ned's
thank you,
so
Mr.
polite.
Cape.
Ned's like, thank you, Mr. Cape.
Yeah. Well, he's a good guy.
I am glad that they didn't, at the end of the movie, try and say that, well, since Peter wasn't there, that there was a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship between Ned and MJ. That it was still just a friendship. That they were still just friends.
Right. So there's still that opening. There's still that opening if they want to, sort of reintroduce them as a couple where he knows her but she doesn't know him in the future. Mm-hmm. They have that storyline available.
Or maybe what happens is MJ ends up having to do research or find out things about Spider-Man as she goes to school at MIT, and that she's doing research into Spider-Man or something. And somehow she just, in the back of her mind, she knows things that she doesn't know she knows because she doesn't remember them.
Could be. Maybe something, or who knows, maybe Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Maybe that's somehow going to change up things again. So people who didn't know anything before now know things, or who knows? I mean, the great thing about fantasy is they can literally do anything they want.
Yeah, exactly. And there has to be a reason why they chose the Scarlet Witch to be the crossover person.
Yeah.
So they never actually, or maybe I missed it in the movie, did they address him getting shot, or are we just to believe that was a through and through?
Oh, when
the police officer shot him.
Right. He's standing over the body of Aunt May and the police officer shoots. I was under the impression that the Stark nanosuit was bulletproof, but that didn't mean he didn't get hurt. So it physically pounded into him.
I thought it was still offline.
No, it was still. I don't think it was offline then. I think it went offline as part of the Statue of Liberty fight.
Unlike others, I haven't seen it 3 times already.
Yeah, but yeah, I could be completely wrong.
And that's where we were talking about, movies. And I was talking to this friend, and she's a teenager, and she's seen it 3 times, a couple times with friends and 1 time with family. So these are the movies that people want to see.
Yes.
You're not going to
I definitely want to see it again, and I will probably also watch it on television, because I think it's that good.
Yeah, it is that good. Absolutely. All right, so to wrap this up, I think it's very clear we all absolutely adore this movie.
Shira does too, even though she didn't see it yet.
Yes, if you've been hearing our daughter occasionally, it's because she loved it as well. I
even though she didn't see it and she was here with the babysitter?
Well, she loved it in spirit. I think that anyone who's probably listened this long has already seen it. If you just wanted to listen to the podcast, but you haven't seen it yet, I hope that, number one, you don't feel anything's been ruined for you, because trust me, seeing it is the glory.
Yeah, what did you think about Batman showing up in the middle?
I knew Disney was going all in with a multiverse, but when, Darth Vader turned Mickey Mouse to the dark side, I was totally surprised.
And I really didn't expect Winnie the Pooh there on the Statue of Liberty.
So, yeah, if you haven't already seen it, I mean, my God, please do. If you have already seen it, I hope you loved it as much as we do. And I hope it left you excited for where they can go from here. It's wide open. And that's exciting because I have a lot of faith and respect in the team. And I think that they are more than capable of doing more great movies in this franchise.
Yes. Hopefully, Sony now understands the value of collaboration in a way that they didn't a couple of 3 years ago.
Yeah. That was interesting when it looked like we were done with MCU Spider-Man movies.
Tom Holland definitely wasn't.
Yeah, he's going to be in the Uncharted movie. We saw the trailer, right?
Yeah, we did. That could be a whole other franchise for Sony if that movie does what I'm sure they hope it will do.
It could be a whole other Indiana Jones series.
Yeah, it could be, First he plays Spider-Man, then he plays Indiana Jones, and, he can go from there.
Mm-hmm. No, just an Indiana Jones type character.
Yeah, type character, of course. Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see where they go with it. And I would love to see Sony's Spider-Verse and MCU's verse really, like you said, collaborate. I think Sony's done really well with the Venom movies, not just financially, but I think they were good. I enjoyed the both.
See, those I think are more candy.
Yeah,
and this is a meal.
They're popcorn movies. They're not this. I mean, they were enjoyable, but they're not this. And I would love to see them bring like Venom and I don't know, maybe Morbius. I haven't seen that movie, but we'll see how that one does. But I'd love to see those characters in the hands of Kevin Feige and the MCU teams and really utilized in an excellent way.
Because I don't really think, yes, money is important, but for them, I think part of it is that they just really care about the characters and the fans and want to do right by those.
Yeah, I think we'll only see Venom and Spider-Man team up. They think they have a good movie
Venom
to tell.
Venom wants to eat Spider-Man already. What do you mean?
Not just because they want, cash. They can make cash with Spider-Man alone.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole bunch of superhero movies coming out next year. So with all the success of Spider-Man, it's kind of easy to forget that there's this whole other universe out there.
Well, we also haven't seen the Eternals yet, so we are missing that puzzle piece.
We are missing that puzzle piece, although I think the Eternals, from what little I've read, I'm trying to keep away from reading too much, but it seems fairly standalone. Like it's obviously part of the MCU, but it seems like it's fairly standalone. So I don't think we missed anything in this movie, let's put it that way, because we hadn't seen the Eternals. It will come to Disney Plus in the near future, and I am certain we will see it. And then we will know what we missed or what we didn't. Well, thank you again, David, for joining us once again to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home.
You're welcome. It's great to have a conversation, and I hope everybody who saw Spider-Man No Way Home will let us know what they thought of it.
Absolutely. And thank you, Golden.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/154. If you like this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It's your reviews that help people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. So the next episode is going to be in 2022. I hope that this has been a good year for you, and if you celebrate holidays around now, I hope they were warm and enjoyable, and we wish you the very best new year. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. Full